alaikum and welcome to Out of Sight, a podcast show aiming to raise awareness about disability and special needs. We explore areas of inclusion and accessibility within our communities. On today's episode, I'm your host Sarah Hamza, and with me is a lovely guest, Sister Fatma Aghai. How are you doing, Fatma? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So just a bit of background to Sister Fatma. Sister Fatma is a qualified paediatric occupational therapist practicing in North London in the NHS. She completed her undergrad in psychology in 2017 and completed her master's in occupational therapy in 2021. She's also one of the co-founders of Amanati, which is an organisation we speak about a lot on this podcast. So I am honoured to have you on the show today, Fatma. And I'm really, really interested in talking about occupational therapy, as well as Amanati, your work in the community, and so much more, inshallah. Thank you. So why don't we just start off by saying, what inspired you to take on occupational therapy? Because you did your undergrad in psychology, and then you moved on to occupational therapy. What inspired you to do that?
OT, occupational therapy, it's a lovely journey that I took actually to get to where I am. It's a profession that's really hidden. Not a lot of people know about it. It's a profession where when you tell people, when people ask what you do, when people ask what you do, they give you that look, and it's like, oh, and I'm like, you don't know what it is. It's absolutely fine because I was in that position myself.
Yeah.
But what got me to where I am? I've always actually, it was a very route I wanted to take ever since I was young. I always wanted to become a primary school teacher. Very different to this.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Although teaching is embedded in OT a lot. But when I was young, from the age of 11 years old, I had this goal in my mind that I was going to be a primary school teacher. And so I grew up with this thought in my head. And it was, when I got to my GCSEs, I remember discovering psychology. And in my days, we didn't have psychology as a subject in GCSE. So to me, I thought, wow, this is so amazing. You know, you're learning about yourself and your behavior and the manners, etc., almost your identity. And so I thought, okay, amazing. I'm going to do that. And then I'll kind of cheat my way in. I'll do my PGCE instead of doing the 3 years primary education. Then I'll do...
Which is a route that most people take,
Yeah. So I thought, okay, that is the route. I had this kind of map in my mind, and I was going to follow that. It was until when I finished my psychology degree, I didn't have time to apply for my PGCE straight away. So I did, in that 1 year before I had done almost going to do my PGCE, I thought I would go into the primary school kind of area and become a TA, a teacher's assistant. And I did. I was actually placed in an amazing school. It was one of those schools where it's kind of one class per year, so it's almost 7 classes in total, so it's quite small.
Oh, wow, small, yeah.
And very educational for me. I applied to my PGC, and I was on that route, heading towards there, until as the year was coming to an end, I was just dreading it. I was just like, oh my goodness, I would wake up in the morning and dread the feeling of going into school. Nothing to do with the school, because the school I was in was absolutely amazing. But I think it was just the thought of, I'm going to do my PGCE next year. I'm going to become a primary school teacher. And I was exposed to it so much. And I took on that role as a teacher that it just wasn't fitting for me. And I was in denial that it wasn't fitting for me because, bearing in mind, ever since I was young, I had this image, and I hadn't had a plan B. If I don't want to become a primary school teacher, I didn't have a plan B.
Yeah.
I was like, so I was almost lost. So I was in denial. I kept on telling myself, persuading myself, no, it's what you want to do. It's just, you're a bit tired. You're feeling a little blue today, etc., etc. Until I couldn't. I just wasn't interested in the primary. And obviously, with all due respect to primary school teachers, because it's a tough job. It's very rewarding. But I just wasn't interested in the whole, I need to follow a curriculum. It wasn't creative to me. It wasn't challenging enough for me. I had missed psychology. I had missed mental health. During my psychology degree, I actually did a placement. So I finished I finished my degree after 4 years instead of 3 years. I took the placements in between. And in one of them, I worked in a special needs school, and I missed that more than what I was doing. So I thought, goodness, I don't like this. And so when I withdrew my application, my PGC application, that sense of relief was amazing. I thought, oh my goodness, so it was the profession. It was the profession that I just didn't want to go into, but I was persuading myself in. And then obviously the stress rose, and I thought, okay, I have no plan. I don't know what I'm going to do. Let's just go with the flow. And so the following year, it came summer. I was constantly thinking about it. What can I do? I had no idea. I knew I wanted to do something in mental health. I had missed psychology. I knew I wanted to work with kids. Something therapy related, something creativity, but science. I was really interested in medicine, but I didn't want to just do medicine alone. So as I was scrolling on the internet, I came across a position, and funny enough, it was the same school that I worked in when I was doing my psychology degree, but it was a secondary school, and to me, I was like, oh, but this is not primary, and I want kind of younger children. It was so difficult, so I was like, what do I do? Do I take it? Do I not? And then when I went for the interview, not that I needed one because they knew me really well, but it's just to kind of refresh of where I've reached up until then. When I was speaking to the head teacher, he was actually telling me that they needed a TA, LSA, so a learning support assistant, for a child who was 13 years old. And I thought, okay, I felt like it was a calling because he was young, he was autism, and I was going to really work closely with him because he was new, coming to the school, and they needed that extra support. So I did. I accepted the position. I went in, and I was there, loved my job. Honestly, it was amazing working with these kids, super rewarding. Until now I visit them, it's almost home. Even during when I had finished my placement as a psychology student, up until then I was kind of going in and out just to say hi. They were the same people there, same kids. It was just, honestly, it felt home. It was such rewarding when I feel it was close to home. So it was just those days where I was super stressed, super anxious. I'd go to them and I'd feel this sense of relief, and that was my kind of de-stress place to go to. And yeah, it was then that I was constantly hearing of, and I was still there not knowing what I was going to do. But I thought I would get some guidance at least. So I would hear about obviously SLT, and I knew what SLT is, and I would hear about OT and dietitians and nurses and etc. And I thought, OT, I keep hearing that, and I had no clue of what this was, and I thought, OT, what is this doing here? Funny enough, because I was actually a student ambassador when I was doing my psychology degree, and as a student ambassador, you take students and people who want to come to the university around the campus, and we had this department for PTs and OTs. And when you're going to the department, you need to describe what the department is and who it's for and what the study, what the course
Classic
is.
open day.
Classic open day, exactly. And I would kind of, when I'd get to, I obviously had to research OT because I had no idea what that is. And me behind the computer, I'm like, what is this? I don't know what it is. And when I'd get to the tour, when I'd get there, I would just explain, so this is this department, and it does, it's for physios and OTs, and physios do this, and I'd brush OT completely underneath the carpet. Little did I know I was actually going to do a profession where I had zero clue about it. But when I got there, I did look into it. I was comparing SLT and OT, which one is for me. And the more reading I was doing, the more I became so blown away by this beautiful profession. I thought, wow, this is helping someone be, someone do, and someone become something. And I thought, okay, this is it. This is exactly who I am, but in a profession that I had no clue existed. And yeah, I got into it 2 years, and it was amazing. It was 6 months later, COVID came. It's super challenging because we were kind of we were almost the guinea pigs of kind of, they didn't know what they were doing with us, and they didn't know how to kind of tackle COVID. And and else we were at home studying. But yeah, it went really nice. It went really well, and it was, alhamdulillah. It's great. It's
Wow.
great to have finished, and
Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah. What a journey. So
Long journey, but when you find it, it's
Yeah.
amazing. It was worth the wait. It was worth that long process.
yeah, it's a journey of decisions. And honestly, I always tell all the girls this as well. Whenever people are applying for university and like trying to think what they're going to do in the future, I always say things like just come about, vocations come about. You don't have to do medicine and become a doctor, dentistry and become a dentist. But there's so much more out there that we really don't know about. And OT, so given my background, so I'm a medical student background, and I should know what an occupational therapist does because it's part of the MDT and like the teams at the hospital. But really and truly, 5 years into medicine, I'm not really sure what an occupational therapist does. So could you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. Honestly, it's not just you. Like I said earlier, it's many people who don't know what an OT, and even medical professions, healthcare professions in the profession where they're working with an OT have no clue what an OT does. And that is part of our role to actually explain, like if we have this beautiful kind of diagram that explains kind of the inside of an OT's head, and
Yeah.
part of it is advocacy. We need to actually advocate for the profession, because it's a hidden profession. And so basically who we basically, in simple terms, help people do the things that they need to do, want to do, and are expected to do. Obviously, it's very summarized, but it's the things that once they were able to do, but can't now because of maybe a surgery or a stroke or even a condition, even as a child, or things that they are just born to not know how to do it as they develop. And so we're there basically helping people do as much as they can, fulfill their time, their quality of life in the most kind of fulfilling way. And it's things that they need to. So the things that they want to do, it's stuff like a child who wants to ride a bike. He doesn't have to do it for survival, but he wants to do it because his friends are riding it, and it's something that's interesting to him.
Yeah.
And so he wants to. Whereas someone who needs to do an occupation, that can be anything such as the ADLs. And so we have the occupation being in the centre, and we have different types of occupations, and they range from ADL, so that's activity of daily living, and these are things like self-care. These are the things that you kind of need to do to survive. So it's kind of like brushing your teeth, toileting, bathing, dressing, feeding. And then we have the IADL, so the instrumental of activities of daily living. And these are the things like, they still add value to your life. You do them on a daily basis almost. So it's shopping, it's paying the bills, driving, taking your pet on a walk, child rearing. All of those things fall under that category. And then you've got things like work. So work is an occupation, and so we help people who want to get into work. We're not occupational health. That's not us.
Yeah, I was
because
just gonna say.
it's a cliche. A lot of people mistake us with occupational health, and we are not that. We don't do any admin
Occupational
regarding
health, just give vaccines to everyone.
That's not us, I promise. But it's all the work employment related stuff, where someone who might be kind of suffering from mental health and just cannot get himself, he needs to go into work, but he can't, and so we help them with that process so that it can be more useful in their time. And then we have play. So play is an occupation, and then we've got leisure, so anything that, hobbies and interests. And then you've got health management, so all the stuff where you do to take care of your health, or whether it's your physical well-being, your mental well-being, medication, kind of sorting out medications and medication management. And then you've got social performance, where this is all kind of to do with the work, the communication of friends, going out with friends, family. How do you participate with these people? And then, sleep. So sleep and rest is an occupation. It's considered doing, even if
Yeah.
it's just lying down on your couch and watching the TV. That is considered an occupation because you're actually going to lie down and then opening the TV. You're doing something. So anything that is doing is an occupation. Is an occupation.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we're mistaken with PTs because, and we had a little chat about that, didn't
Yeah.
we? About how they are hand in hand. We are very, we do work together, especially with peds, with children. We work hand in hand with dietitians, with speech and language therapists, with PTs, so physios. The difference between physios and us is that I like to explain it, we like to explain it in the sense of where a physio takes you from point A to B, he teaches you how to get from A to B. We are the people who teach you what to do in A and what to do in B. That's the difference. So the physios are all about working on your mobility, on your movement, on the musculoskeletal stuff, all of that kind of movement, the pain you might feel in your limbs, muscles, etc. They work on treating that, whereas with us, we're more about the functional things. We help you functionally we equip you to functionally perform in the real world. And
Wow.
that's us. And I can go on and on, trust me, but yeah, for time's
Wow,
sake.
that's a lot. So basically what I've heard you say is that you help people live, essentially, to carry out their day-to-day tasks. And it's something that is really, really important, especially for individuals or from what I see, patients that may have gone, let's say they've had a car accident, or for example, like you mentioned, children that just haven't developed in a certain way, and they haven't been able to do simple tasks, maybe because they haven't been taught it or because they have developmental delay or some sort of learning disability. So you help them kind of fulfill what they should be doing, essentially, right?
Yes.
So why is it such a hidden specialty? Because it's such an important one, but why is there, so personally, I feel like I'm ignorant to the fact that the services even exist. So why isn't there much of a push in that direction, do you think?
I genuinely believe it's because, first of all, I actually don't exactly know why it's hidden. And it's a shame it's hidden because there are so many people who need this but don't know that they need it, and they don't even know that something like this exists to help them tackle that problem they're facing. But why it's hidden, whether it's funding, whether it's the NHS, it is. So obviously, OT is fairly new, I would say. But it's not completely new. It's an old profession, but we don't have a lot of OTs. OT is lacking in its. We do need OTs pretty much everywhere because they exist everywhere. Whether you've come from a stroke, whether you're a child with a neurodevelopmental condition, whether you are someone who has just come from a hip replacement surgery, any other surgery that you need help functioning to survive and to live and to have a meaningful life, a good quality of life. That's where OTs are. So yeah, it's a real shame. And to give an example, a family member had, when they had their hip replacement done, there were some problems that arose that took place during the surgery, and she then had what we call a foot drop. And you know what a foot drop is when they can't lift their feet because they're just unable, the nerve damage, they can't lift their feet themselves. And I remember when she really wanted to, she depended on driving a lot. It took her from A to B, and of course many of us depend on driving. So when she really wanted to do this basic occupation, that I didn't call it an occupation then, now I do because it's a doing. Driving is an essential kind of part of of what makes this person, if that's what's meaningful to them. And we would constantly kind of, we had no answer for this person. We would tell her, you know, there's nothing we can do if we do kind of complain to when we did complain, she was seen by a physio, and they kind of gave her something she had to wear so that it doesn't drop and it prevents her from tripping. But that still didn't help with driving. It was still too risky to drive. And little did I know, I mean, and unfortunately they hadn't, whether it's the lack of understanding of what an OT does, or they didn't have anyone on board, etc. at the time, they didn't even introduce, they didn't even tell my mum this family member of, now that I said it, my mother, to an OT.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because they could have helped her. They could have found alternatives. They could have. They have the skills. They have the adaptation. They have the equipment to help people do the things that is meaningful to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a shame, and I genuinely don't know why it's hidden.
Yeah, because to me now, speaking to you, it seems like one of those professions that are very, very important, because it's essentially patient advocacy, right? It's looking at the patient from all aspects, not just, so in medicine there is this massive focus towards, you know, there's a disease or there's a problem, there's an accident, there's something wrong, we're going to cure it, or we're going to fix it, or we're going to put it onto some sort of treatment plan, and then that's it. But there's the other things that happens to the patient when they go into hospital, or when they get debilitated by disease, or other things that maybe, I don't know, maybe this is just a flaw in me and ignorance in me, but sometimes doctors overlook that, and then other people don't advocate for the patients in that way. And I think occupational therapy, a big role of it is just advocating for the lifestyle of patients, which is very, very important. And one of the, you know, I think one of the most important things about the show is that we raise awareness in that way, where we say there are services available, and that, so you're more specific towards pediatric, the pediatric community. And so for parents that might think, actually, you know, my child does need something in that way, and I can't support my child in this way, and I wish the NHS was to help me in that way. And so your role is there, and the services are there, and you just have to access them, or sometimes you just have to advocate for your own child these days, unfortunately.
I agree. No, I agree. And going back to OT, I love we have a beautiful saying that says, where medicine adds life to, where medicine adds days to life, OT actually adds life to days. Wow. So it's all about the quality of your life, and it's a really important, honestly, it's a really important factor in our lives. We take our daily routine, we take it for granted, because we wake up, we brush our teeth, we go to the bathroom, take care of ourselves, then get changed, go to work or go to school, come back, have dinner, sit with our family, see friends, all of these things. We don't actually know we are doing these things. This is what makes us us.
Yeah.
But there are so many people who are deprived from that. They can't do those things, whether it's a condition, whether it's their environment, whether they are in... I mean, there's even OTs in prison.
OT forensics.
OT forensics, because there's a big lack, or there's a deprivation in occupation there. They are deprived from so many needs they have, and so yeah, it's really essential. It's quite a big thing.
Yeah. Thank you. So what does your role entail in terms of pediatric? Because I've seen, so you have an Instagram. I don't know if we're allowed to shout it out, but give yourself a shout out if you want. I think it's Fatma the OT, right?
Yes.
So I was reading one of your posts about teaching or OT, occupational therapy with play. What does play actually mean for a child, or what's the impact in that sense?
So play is the biggest thing with pediatric occupational therapy, where we wouldn't involve we involve creativity with elderly or with adults. We need to think of ways to get them to do the things especially if they lack motivation. We have this beautiful model called the MOHO model, which I'll go into a little bit later, because it's quite essential in even with peds. But with peds, play is a big thing. Their life revolves around play. They are constantly playing. They're constantly exploring. And so what we do, the occupations that I mentioned earlier, if the child is, for example, let's use education as a occupation. If the child is lacking, or his goal is to be able to handwrite, be able to write basically, or organize his books, whatever it is in education, we use the play to get there, or whether it's toileting, or whether it's grooming, etc., self-care. Again, that's a big occupation, and again, we use play to get the child to where he wants to. So essentially, this child is doing the things where we're getting to where he needs to be, but it's through play, and that's the part of where where creativity, compassion, and science are put together, and that you get an OT out of that. So plays a big thing, and it's what motivates the child. It's what pushes the child to do the things he's essentially he wants to do, but for us to get the child to do the things that we want them to do, to reach the goal, we do that through play.
Yeah.
And it's all sorts of things. It can be, through messy play. It just depends on the goal. If the goal is to work on sensory, for example, we use a lot of sensory equipment. We have to really help the child depending if he's hyper or hypo sensitive. So hyper is when the child is very sensitive to noise, when a child is sensitive to things, to vision, to smell, to taste. He's very, or she is very aware of her body, and that's why you see some children don't like to be hugged, especially children with autism, I speak particularly. There are many children who don't like to be touched, who don't like to be hugged.
Yeah.
And obviously we need to respect that, but we need to understand why he doesn't or she doesn't like being touched, because this stimulation just makes him anxious or makes her anxious. Whereas a child with hypo, they're constantly being driven by the extra sound and the extra noise and the jumping, and they need that to desensitize themselves. And sometimes when we have children like that, before we actually start on our session, we get a child to go on the trampoline and do as many jumps as they want, or we get a child to... We use a lot of physical play just to get the child to kind of self-regulate. We regulate the child through that, and then we start our sessions. So it's going back to what I said earlier. If it's sensory, it depends on the child and their needs, and then we look and we design, we create an intervention that suits him or her. And again, it's just all through play. Even handwriting, you'd think handwriting, well, what can you do? How do you teach a child handwriting? Well, handwriting is different shapes. There's lines, and there's circles, and there's the wiggly stuff, and etc. So for a child to be exposed to handwriting, we don't just give him a pen. We first expose him to the different shapes. We could get sand, foam, get a child to just use his hands, really touch those materials, and create things with the objects we present to him. And then gradually, through grading, we then get the child to slowly reach to where we want him to reach. But it's all done through play. I mean, even the simple things of teaching a child toileting or washing, etc. Again, all through play, and that's what drives and motivates a child.
Wow, that's really fun.
Super fun. We put the fun in functional.
You put the fun in functional. No, that was a good one. Yeah, that sounds really super fun, actually. And it's nice to hear that there are services out there, and that you're doing a fantastic job about in essentially doing that and trying to help these children kind of live their lives to the fullest potential that they could.
Definitely.
Which is really, really important and sometimes overlooked, unfortunately.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think there's a bit of a gap in Western medicine and kind of the practice of medicine in the West generally, in terms of the Islamic rituals or an Islamic kind of occupations, if you want to say, or even cultural occupations, like, for example, wudu or salah. And a lot of the times I've heard, and I know we discussed this earlier, where people won't try to teach maybe a child with autism or a child with learning difficulties how to do wudu or pray, maybe because they don't think, or they're not equipped with the resources of how to even approach such a situation. But we see that, we spoke about Jamil earlier. If you haven't watched the Quran documentary on ABTV, the Amanati one, with Jamil, who is a hafiz, so he's a memorizer of the Quran, he was able to do such a thing, but if it wasn't for his mother's support. So with other occupations like wudu, would you consider wudu an occupation?
Definitely.
So with an occupation like wudu, or because that's something that we do at least 3 times a day, or prayer at least 3 times a day, does occupational therapy have a role in that?
Definitely. Occupational therapy has everything to do, it has things to do with everything involving. So when we take a child, when we take someone, they come with baggages. They come with a baggage, essentially,
Yeah.
don't they? And that includes their identity, that includes their religion, that includes their social, their ethnicity, their financial status, their family, siblings, if they have any, if they don't. It comes to do with their gender, whether it's a he or a she. This child comes with so much things, and that is the beauty of OTs. We take a very holistic, a child-centered approach, where we look at a child as a whole, because any of these factors can affect their occupation, any of them. If you're a boy from a girl, a boy is interested in other things than a girl, and vice versa. If and again, age and race, and so we take these factors and we brainstorm in our heads or on a sheet, and we then look at what makes this person him or her. Is it what drives this person? What drives this person to do the things he wants to do or needs to do? And I brought up the MOHO model previously. It's a beautiful model because it really looks at, we like to call it it looks at what motivates them. So what motivates them, essentially. And we look at the things like, so there's 3 components that makes a person perform, that results in occupational performance. And these are the volition, the habituation, and the performance capacity. So we have the volition, which is what motivates this person. What are their values? What are their interests? What drives this person to do what they're doing? So you're interested in this podcast, and here you are hosting this because it motivates you, it pushes you to do it, and that is a part of you. So it's all these kind of personal factors, your values, your interests, and your sense of effectiveness. And there's the habituation, so all the stuff that involves your roles and your habits, and we take that into consideration. Your role as a student who is hosting, for example, the out of sight. Again, we get that, put that into context. And then we look at the performance capacity. So with your mental or your physical disability or ability or your condition, what can you or can't you do? And I say this because, so with OT, the beauty of OT is that we take a top-down approach. We don't take the bottom-up approach. And what that means is that whilst the bottom medicine almost takes the bottom-up approach, where they really look at the deficit and the condition, we don't do that. We really think of the condition the very last thing. We take a top-down approach, and that means we look at the person in his occupational being, in his performance. How does he perform, and what can he do, and what can't, and how we never restrict the condition to us. A condition is never a reason to not be able to do the things you want to do. Anyone can do anything. And that's why we take this top down. We look at the task, we look at someone as as an identity, as what makes them them, and then we work around that. So we never kind of look at a child with ASC and then we look at, okay, so this child has autism. Now let me think, this child has sensory needs. This child can't do this child can't, and we're constantly saying can't. Whereas we look at the person, we observe their behavior, and okay, he can do this, he can do that, he can do this. And then we work around creating an intervention or a plan, doing the things he can do to achieve what the goal is, if that makes sense. So a child who, a mother who comes and tells me, I want my child to be able to do wudu, if this is meaningful, if that's what he wants to do, or salah, or even Psalm, even
got that one.
all of these factors, going to, for example, Hajj, or going to these pilgrimages, going to the mosque, all of these are occupations. And it's so easy for us to say, oh, well, my child has autism, or my child has ADHD, and therefore I shouldn't take him there, or he shouldn't do this, and la haraj ala al-marid, right? We have this, and it's true. Not that, obviously, coming from a fiqh perspective, this child is not going to be accountable on the Day of Judgment. Why couldn't he pray the way he should, or why didn't he perform his wudu the correct way? And no, but it's at least, if that's what makes him, if that is part of his identity, then he can do it regardless of his condition. And so we help the child do it with the condition he's in his own style, in his own unique way, getting to where he could. So there's definitely room. There is definitely room for these beautiful. Just like, look at Jamil. He is one amazing child. And honestly, if anyone hasn't seen this show yet, I really, really recommend you watching it, because it's not just looking at this child and thinking, wow, he can do this, and wow, it's looking at this. It inspires someone like me who doesn't have autism, who I don't have vision impairments. I look at this person and think, if he can do that, then me as an OT, and me as a Muslim person, I should be able to learn the Quran the way he did. I should be able to memorize it. I have no excuse not to. And me as an OT, I look at it and I think, these are occupations. These are meaningful occupations to this family and to this child. I hope, and inshallah, one day we can come up with advice sheets. Inshallah, more OTs. I hope more OTs will come out of this.
After this podcast, I was like, everyone's going to say, I want to do occupational therapy.
Inshallah. But if we more OTs in the community, there's so much things we can do. We can come up with advice. You can come up with interventions and strategies, and how a child can learn, if it's through Braille for someone with vision impairments, or if someone has. If he's too sensitive to water, for example, and we're speaking about wudu, then there are different ways we can adapt, we can change the situation so that the child can ultimately reach to this goal. So it's possible. If Jamil can do it, anyone can do it with any condition. And that's what OTs are here. We're here to get you to where you want to be, regardless of your condition.
Inshallah. Super inspiring. That's actually really, really inspiring. And Jamil's story in itself is extremely inspiring. So Jamil's story was kind of like a Amanati kind of documentary, right? You were part of the co-founders who founded Amanati. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey towards Amanati and what Amanati is to you right now?
Amanati is so special, and honestly, it's something to be so proud of. Being the co-founder or not, it's something to look at and think, wow, we are heading towards a beautiful journey, a beautiful end. But I take no credit. I was part of the bringing of Amanati, but it was right bang where I started my OT journey, and then COVID, and there was so much happening, so I took a little break. And Khataya, they did a lot of hard work, and the things that they're doing, and where they're going towards, amazing. It's amazing stuff. And I really remember how we actually started. So we were a few girls, and I remember one of them coming and messaging me and telling me there's this and there's that, and we constantly speak about this. We constantly speak about the lack of facilities and the lack of things that the community centres don't have the facility and to kind of welcome people with special need. And so we would constantly speak about it and think, oh wow, I wish. And I remember, so one of the girls, when previously I was involved in organising clubs with children in Shahr Muharram and Shahr Ramadan, and this parent with a child with autism, it was so difficult for her to come. And I remember her asking me, "Can I come? But is there just a room, any room? It doesn't have to be fancy, and just any room I can be in, just on the side, so that I can bring my other children." And I remember answering her and saying, "I'm really sorry. I don't have much access. I don't believe there is, and I don't know where I can take you and where I can place you." And it was such a shame, because this is a mother who has children who don't have special needs, who can benefit from these programs and these clubs, but can't take them because she doesn't know where to take her other child, and he or she need their mother. She needs to constantly be around her child. So when we speak about it, we could see it was so obvious, the lack in our community, in our centres, and it's not their fault. It's absolutely, and we can speak about that later. Whose fault it is? We can discuss that. But when we came about and we were sitting, I remember it was about 5, 6 of us, and we were going around asking, what do you wish for Amana to be? Where do you think? We hadn't even come up with a name. I remember it was still very new. But where do you see us in a couple of years' time? What do we want to achieve from this? And the different stories each one was saying was really inspiring, and it was possible. It was something that was lacking. I mean, there is no organisation like Humanity so far in London, at least in the UK. There's a beautiful organisation called Smile in Canada, and what they do is, have you seen what they do?
Yeah, I've come across them.
Amazing, and inshallah, it's not far. We're not far from that. But it was when we were answering questions and going around, and I remember when we had launched, we had really kind of brought ourselves out, and we had created our social media platforms. The amount of parents, Sarah, that came, and I wasn't behind Instagram or social medias, but we would share it in the group. And the amount of people there were with children with special needs, who it all got us to be in tears. We were looking at the messages and we were genuinely crying, because we were so happy. They were extremely happy for something like this to finally come about, to almost not rescue them, but to speak on their behalf, to kind of say, look, we exist as well, but no one really knows about us, because they have children with neurodevelopmental disorder conditions, but they're at home, nowhere to be seen. They're not even known. They're deprived of going to majalis or going to programs. They're deprived from their occupations, because they need to be with their children. There is nowhere to put their children. And so we'd read these messages and think, oh my goodness, this is really, really, really necessary. This is something where we can change these parents' lives, we can change these children's lives, they can be more involved, we can connect them to their identity. I'm sure there are parents out there who are in a similar position, who want to be as proud and who want to help their children like Jamil's parents did, but they don't have the facilities, or they don't have the knowledge, they don't know how and where to start. So when we came about it, that we do have a long way to go, but it was just the fact that we did this, and we were caught by, so many parents, so many people who have relatives with special needs, to finally speak up on their behalf was amazing.
Yeah.
So alhamdulillah, we are heading somewhere.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, and I really do hope so, because I myself see such an importance for having an organisation such as Amanati in our communities, because it's one of those things, like we say all the time, you said it yourself, the organization stemmed from such a big deficit in just education, in advocacy, in awareness, you know, and I say this quite a lot, I say this in pretty much every episode, I always say, a lot of the problems that our community has stems from the fact that there's ignorance, or I wouldn't say ignorance, but it's just the lack of education. So I always say one of my biggest flaws and one of the things that I'm trying to work on is trying to learn from people around me, because, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm not, you know, in my family, I'm not directly affected by any sort of disability, or I haven't come across growing up individuals with you know, learning difficulties or hearing impairment or visual impairment or any sort of disability that's very obvious. So growing up, I never saw that there was any problem with our community, because why would there be? You know, I'm making use of the community, I'm going to majalis, my friends are going to majalis. There was no one telling me, actually, wait, hold on, why doesn't this mosque have a wheelchair ramp? Because I'm not directly affected by it, or it doesn't affect me. But now whenever I speak to guests, or even speaking to individuals like yourself or parents, is you realize that there's so much to do or there's so much difference to make in our communities, and no one objects it. But it's actually raising the point of, by the way, your mosque doesn't have a wheelchair ramp, and then them saying, oh yeah, we don't. We should do this. Because most of the time, no one's going to object and say, we shouldn't put one in, or we shouldn't bring a BSL interpreter, or, but it's, who's going to remember?
They don't, they don't. And that's why I said earlier that I genuinely don't blame centres. I remember when we had the convention recently, and we had the Amanati stall, when we had people coming to, so myself and another couple of sisters were behind the stall, and when we had, I remember having someone come to me and asking, what is this? What is Amanati? When I explained, he was really delighted, to the extent where he was like, can you come to Essex and have a look at our centre, and we're happy to take on whatever changes you see that is necessary, because we don't advocate, they're not welcomed. I've just come to realise that actually they're not welcomed.
Yeah, they're not.
They're, and they don't, obviously they don't intend, they mean well, they hold their programmes, and they do mean well, they do want, it is welcome to everyone, they want everyone to be there, but they just, because like you said, they don't have a sibling, or they don't have a child, or they don't have a family member, or know of someone who has special needs or who has a disability, they don't know what's missing, they don't have the eye for it almost. So it's just all about teaching them, and it's people like myself and yourself to go out there and to actually tell people, educate organisations, go around in centres and tell them what special needs is, what someone with autism is. People don't know what, till now they don't know what autism is. And it is in our community, unfortunately, because there's this stigma, there's this taboo, there's this shame or embarrassment of, I have a child with special needs, and if it's autism, then they have a very different outlook on it. And unfortunately, there are many children who are undiagnosed, and even if they are diagnosed, they're still in denial. And so therefore, neither is the child receiving the help. Families don't know what they need to do to these children to help them, because they think they adjust and they work and they do everything the way me and you might do. So there's this denial, there's this lack of understanding. So it's all about going out there, really putting ourselves there and telling them, look, this is someone, this is what autism is. This is what, for example, ADHD. These are people with neurodevelopmental conditions, and this is what it means. It comes with this and it comes with that, and in order for you to accommodate and welcome, these are the changes that are necessary. These are the changes that are needed to welcome them, to actually include them. So it really isn't, I wouldn't say centre's fault, it's just learning, because I'm sure, like you said, once they do know, they will accommodate, they will welcome. It's just putting ourselves out there. It's really just educating. It's all about education, because once the education is there, people will be so proud to show off their child. Just like, for again, going back to Jamil and other amazing children who they're not ashamed, they're not embarrassed to take their child to Majal, they're not embarrassed to show him off. In fact, they're proud to show their child off, like, look, this child has autism, this child has vision impairments, but look at where he is now and look at what he's doing to the community, and he's inspiring thousands and hundreds of people.
Yeah. And it truly is just that. I think, obviously, Amanati does a lot more than just education. They do so much more, but I think the first step for most people is just learning. Being open to learn as well. And then addressing faults that we see. I've had so many guests on the show, and Zahra Faisal as well, co-host, who a lot of them just say that people judge, their kids, or maybe they see them from the outside or judge a situation, and then they say, oh, this kid has not been brought up properly, or this kid's parents are not parenting properly, when really and truly somebody else can come in and be like, actually, hold on, you shouldn't judge that like that. You should say, maybe, this kid actually has autism, and so the mother is trying her best and the kid is doing his best too, which a lot of the time we forget. It's pressure on the kid, it's pressure on the parents, but inshallah we're striving and we're moving towards a more inclusive community, which is what we're hoping for. So I know this is a question we've kind of answered, but we've spoken a little bit about inclusivity, but what can the viewers or the listeners do to get involved and to kind of help with moving the community into a more accessible or a more inclusive way, do you think, in your opinion?
Learning is definitely one of them. Being open to learn about these conditions is definitely one of them. And you need to be active in this. You need to actually go out there, contact professionals who specialize in this area. Let them come, like I said, one of the examples of visiting centres. Go around and visit centres and see what is missing, ask questions. So definitely do invite professionals, healthcare professions who specialise in this area. Welcome them, let them have a look around, speak to them, ask them what we can do to accommodate for people with special needs. And even to viewers, even to people who don't necessarily have a role, or they're not a lead of their centre, when you do come across a child or someone with special needs, I always say this because it's so important to them. Don't sympathise. They don't need this sympathy look. If anything, it can be offensive, but empathise. Ask them, have a chat with them. Ask them what you can do. If you're seeing them struggle with something, ask them what you can do to help. But obviously, if they're sitting down and it's quite obvious that they might have special needs, don't obviously go and rush and be overprotective. They don't need that as well. But empathise, don't sympathise. They don't need that sympathy. Oh, you've got that all. They don't need that. Actually, go and ask them. If you're brave enough, go and ask what it is. If you don't know what it is, let them educate you, let them tell you. So definitely empathise, definitely be more welcoming. When you see a child who might be distressed because of whatever sensory difficulty he's going through, it's okay. Don't get agitated so easily. Trust me, the parent is as stressed as you are. The child is even more stressed than you are. Ask what help they need to help them. But it's just things like that in centres. Be welcoming to have sign language interpreters, for example. These ramps, understand what it involves. Really understand the human nature. I'm pretty sure now, like with programs like this, and alhamdulillah, we're sharing it left, right, and centre. When they look at it, I'm hoping, a leader of some sort of centre is watching. It can go when you do these stuff, you are inspiring another organisation and another. And this is even to organisations that don't necessarily have a place. We know organisations that don't have a place and they move from X to Y to Z. They don't have like a solid centre. Again, you can still invite people, you know, the healthcare professions, like Sister, for example, Azra, or many other special needs experts. Invite them over, have a chit chat with them, ask them what we can do to include them, be more inclusive through these methods.
Yeah.
And it can go a long way. You can, if
Yeah.
it's one step at a time, but it's doing something and inspiring others. So this sign language interpreter, for example, in the Muslim convention, you've now probably inspired other organizations to do the same. When they have programs, when they have lectures, they have a sign language interpreter with them so that they can they can be along. But it's inspiring. It's
like you said, I think representation is also very, very important, which is one of the key points that you mentioned there. With only a couple minutes left on the clock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, unfortunately. It always goes really fast. But what would be your parting kind of nuggets of knowledge for our viewers and listeners? And I mean, I've learned so much throughout this episode, and I'm really upset that it's nearly coming to an end. But what would be your like little nuggets of knowledge left for us?
Are we talking to viewers, to parents, to teachers?
You got 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes. Tell us what you want.
If it's to viewers, I know we said we will mention this really quickly, but I will mention it because it's quite important. If you have a child, if you're a parent or you're a caregiver, you're a sibling, and you are concerned by your child's or your sibling's behaviour, and you're concerned he might be on a spectrum or he has behavioural difficulties, whether it's sensory difficulties, and you're on that waiting list for the assessment, my advice to be, and if you're struggling with, you know, if your child's struggling with sleep, if your child's struggling with any occupation, any meaningful occupation, definitely do check out the websites on the NHS. There are advice sheets. They're available to support your children.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Fatma. And I'm
Absolute
really,
pleasure.
really upset that this episode is coming to an end. I know it's been it's been really, really useful for me. I've learnt so much just about your occupation as an occupational therapist, and the work to do in the community and the work you have done in the community. So it's been an absolute honour speaking to you today. And inshallah, the viewers and the listeners have benefited or have learnt something from this, inshallah. So thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. So thank you very much to the viewers and listeners for hearing us out today. Inshallah, you have listened or benefited from anything. Inshallah, see you next week in the next episode, inshallah. Ma'as salama.